Well, it's official. I miss Batwoman.
Congratulations, Barney, and enjoy your grand prize, a lifetime supply of Duff beer.
Just hook it to my veins!
Are you f***ing kidding me right now? Guys, I know it probably seems like I say this a lot, but I don't know where to begin. I'm not even sure if I know what to say about this one. One, because for the second week in a row, at a point where the show should be ramping up for their big finale, absolutely nothing of importance happened until the last 30 seconds. And two, because I have no idea how we got here. No idea how a show like this is even allowed to exist. This wasn't just bad. This was Batwoman bad. But in a weird way, it's almost worse. Because at least with the CW, that's what we expect. But this is a Marvel project. A studio that for a long time ran like a well-oiled machine, and a show that has literally tens of millions of dollars pumped into each individual episode, not to mention an Emmy-winning actress in the title role. And with all that going for it, that the show could somehow be allowed to be not just bad, but this f***ing bad? I am just baffled right now. The only saving grace is that once again Daredevil did not appear and thankfully was not associated with this garbage. But I won't be able to say that forever. In the next 2 weeks, Daredevil is going to show up. And if you have any faith whatsoever that these writers are not going to completely ruin him, then I don't know what show you've been watching, but it's not this one. There is no reason for the show to be this awful. No reason. But here we are with an episode all about our heroine obsessing about why a guy she had sex with hasn't texted her back yet. That's it. That's the story. That's the whole episode right there. And while I'm on the subject of story, I want you and any slack-jawed, paint-sniffing clowns out there who might still be defending this idiocy to ask yourselves this question. How much has actually happened in this show so far? And I don't mean the pointless everyday bullshit that the writers are so laser focused on. I mean actual important plot-related stuff. Jen became She-Hulk, and someone's trying to steal her blood. That's 2 episodes worth of story. Now, really, the origin could have and should have been stretched out a lot more, but they wanted to get it out of the way as quickly as possible, so 2 episodes worth of story. We're on number 7 now, and absolutely nothing has happened. There's only 2 episodes left in the season, the entire series, God willing, and the story hasn't even left the gate yet. Character development has been almost non-existent, and when it does exist, it's completely shoddy and ass backwards. The writers are some of the most incompetent buffoons when it comes to constructing a narrative that I've seen on any TV show in years. They couldn't care less about the fans, doing the character justice, or being faithful to the comics they obviously haven't read. They're writing for no one but themselves. The show claims to be a comedy, but it's the most painfully unfunny piece of garbage I've seen in I don't know how long, and not a single male character the show sinks its claws into is getting out unscathed because, as was on full display in this episode, the soy is flowing like a goddamn river. In this episode alone, the writers took not 1, but 6 male characters from the comics and turned them into pathetic, soy-fueled parodies of their comic incarnations. The only consolation I can offer to any fans those characters might have is that the episode was so fucking boring, I doubt anyone was able to stay awake long enough to actually see them. Except for me, unfortunately. I don't want to talk about this one for a second longer than I have to. And luckily, I don't think the video is going to be quite as long this time, because really, there's hardly anything to go over. Jen obsesses over a guy not texting her back, then goes to group therapy and listens to a bunch of unfunny beta jackasses talk about their feelings. That's about it. The episode begins with Jen getting out of the shower and being greeted by a text from Josh. You know, that super cute, super nice guy she met at the wedding last week? The guy who was really into Jen and not She-Hulk? The guy who seemed too good to be true, especially on a show that turns every single male character into an idiot, an asshole, or a soy farmer? The guy who, the second he showed up, every single person watching this crap said was obviously evil, because really, what the hell else would he be on a show like this? That dude. Him and Jen really hit it off at the wedding. They've been texting back and forth since then, and now they've made a date, which we learn about through perhaps the most boring, pointless, sleep-inducing waste of time I think I've ever seen in a big-budget production. It's a musical montage of Jen texting, walking around her apartment, getting dressed, grabbing a snack, having a drink, cleaning up, taking a selfie, and all of that is before the date actually starts. We're not even 3 minutes in, and I'm already struggling to stay awake. Then it changes to a montage of the dates. They have dinner at a food truck. Date ends with a handshake. Jen's texting Josh about stupid cutesy poo nonsense during an important work meeting. They go out again to a flea market or something. Date almost ends with a kiss, but then doesn't. They do more texting. They go to a drive-thru movie, exchange awkward glances. At the end of the third date, she finally invites him in for some heterosexual hanky-panky, and if this show is taking notes from the Batwoman playbook, and I think we all know it is, heterosexuality can only mean that something really bad is about to happen to one or both of them. And sure enough, when Jen wakes up the next morning, Josh is mysteriously gone. Gee, I wonder where this is going. The writers have constructed the story so brilliantly, it's impossible to tell. So Jen wonders where Josh is, sends him a text, and obsesses over why he's not texting her back. And you better get used to that, because it's not just the A-plot, it's the entire plot. Later at the office, diverse female BFF announces that Jen has been nominated for Female Lawyer of the Year. Female Lawyer of the Year. And what makes it even more ironic is that I think the writers meant it seriously. Wow. Okay. Let's take the female part out for a second. Lawyer of the Year? What exactly are we basing this on? What show have the writers been watching? Because on the one I've been watching for the last 7 godless episodes, Jen is one of the worst lawyers I've ever seen in a TV show. She doesn't understand very basic legal concepts that are such common knowledge even I know about them, like why people don't have to copyright their own names. She very nearly bungled several cases that were so pathetically easy you'd think they'd be impossible to lose, and only ended up winning them because the plot said so despite her working overtime to screw them up. Half the time when she's at the office, instead of doing her job, she's doing stupid shit like setting up her dating profile, or texting her boyfriend, or talking about going shopping for clothes, or twerking. And the only reason she even has this job in the first place is because of a reason that had nothing to do with her being a lawyer at all. But all that noise. Female Lawyer of the Year. Unless this is the legal equivalent of the Razzies, I'm calling bullshit, and so should you. But Jen doesn't even care that she was nominated for Female Lawyer of the Year because she's too busy obsessing about why Josh hasn't texted her back. Which leads us into our second montage of the episode, a montage of Jen spending days obsessing about why Josh hasn't texted her back. Eating breakfast while waiting for a text. Doing yoga while waiting for a text. Watching The Muppets while waiting for a text. Oh no. No. Please don't bring the Muppets into this. She-Hulk does not deserve to be graced with the presence of the Muppets. They, along with Daredevil, need to be kept as far away from this trash as humanly possible. Fast forward several days, and Jen is still watching her phone like a fucking hawk and obsessing about where the text from Josh could possibly be. Jen? You had sex with him, and then he disappeared. He took off before you woke up. Didn't leave a note, hasn't called, hasn't texted, no contact since whatsoever. It seems pretty obvious what happened, and you should know that because it's basically the same as what happened with Dr. Muscles McHorny a few episodes earlier, except you didn't catfish him this time, and he didn't even stick around as long as the first guy did. You are a grown-ass adult woman, and you're acting like a 12-year-old obsessing over her first crush after holding hands for a second or two. Now, this this may have been the experience of many of the women in the writer's room, but the fact remains, you've taken your title character, one you were already struggling to get people on board with, and made her look fucking pathetic. Knock it off! On Sunday morning, Jen is woken up by a call from Emil Blonsky's parole officer. Apparently, Blonsky's power inhibitor has malfunctioned, and since for some idiotic bullshit reason, the department tasked with keeping the abomination in check doesn't have the resources to keep the abomination in check, he's asking Jen to meet him at Blonsky's yoga retreat or whatever the f*** it is to be his insurance policy in case anything interesting happens. Spoiler, it doesn't. So Jen makes the long drive up to the yoga retreat while constantly checking her phone, obsessing over why Josh hasn't texted her yet. I'm beginning to sense a pattern here. They arrive at the place. No mention is ever made of Blonsky's 7 soulmates. They're just gone because the plot's done with them now. Not that it had any use for them to begin with. And turns out the whole thing was a false alarm. Blonsky wasn't up to anything, wasn't trying to get back to being the abomination, because why would we want to see something fun like that? No, he just got a jolt from an electric fence while trying to help his favorite chicken. That's not even a metaphor, if you can believe it. So the parole officer fixes the inhibitor and then hauls ass out of there like a coward. But before Jen can f*** off herself, her car is smashed by... oh my god. 2 new characters from the comics, or more specifically, cheap-ass, bargain basement, soy-based substitutes for 2 characters from the comics, Manball and El Aguila. And their costumes look like the wardrobe department bought them at a Kmart clearance sale after Halloween. Not the only characters who are gonna get that treatment, by the way. It's not funny, and once again, the writers are doing nothing but exposing how spiteful they feel toward men in general, not to mention the comics the show is supposed to be based on. They can all kiss the darkest, hairiest, sweatiest part of my ass. So now Jen is super annoyed, because how is she supposed to get home when her car is wrecked? Well, Jen, there's this nifty new concept sweeping the nation called Uber that you may or may not have heard of. Also, and I guess I have to be the one to remind you about this because the writers clearly f***ing forgot, we literally saw Bruce teaching you how to jump like a f***ing mile at a time in the first episode of this farce. You could probably get home a lot faster that way than you could by driving. Oh, but I guess we don't have the budget for something cool like that, right? Which, incidentally, I'm guessing, is why we don't see the f***ing abomination at any point in this episode either. Now the tow truck won't get there for hours, which means, because the plot says so, unfortunately, Jen is stuck at Emil Blonsky's yoga retreat, sweat lodge, life coach thing, and even more unfortunately, so is the audience. Now stop me if you've heard this one. Jen is still obsessing over why Josh hasn't texted her back. And after being told by Blonsky 2 separate times in the same scene that there's no Wi-Fi and no cell phone reception out here, we are then subjected to montage number 3, which is nothing but Jen walking around the whole f***ing property, staring at her phone, trying to get a signal, and obsessing over why Josh hasn't texted her back. Jesus H. Christ! Hey Jen, you know what? Maybe you just suck at sex. Have you thought about that? I mean, hell, this is the 2nd guy in a row in just a few episodes who couldn't ghost you fast enough after you jumped in the sack with him. And sure, finding a decent guy on this show is like trying to find a unicorn, the Lindbergh baby, the lost city of Atlantis, and the Ark of the fucking Covenant. But at this point, it might be time to consider that maybe, just maybe, the real problem is staring at you in the mirror. Eventually, Jen wanders into a group therapy session, which is really just another opportunity for the writers to shit on even more male characters. Look them up on the Marvel Wiki, they're all in there. Porcupine, who is a dude in a porcupine suit, and Saracen, who thinks he's a vampire. Because with the Blade movies scheduled to start production soon, our first exposure to vampires in the MCU needs to be making them a fucking joke, and not even the funny kind either. So that's 4 new male characters from the comics that the writers introduced this week for no other reason than to make them look goddamn ridiculous. And nobody's laughing at this but the writers, because this entire godforsaken production was born out of spite. Let's shit all over men and all these things the fans love because we think it's funny and f*** everybody else. You must be so proud. At least 3 of these assholes are being coded as not so ambiguously gay, which I assume is not what they were in the comics. El Aguila did some light matadoring in college. Wink. Manbull and El Aguila have codependency issues. Porcupine is too scared of being vulnerable to remove his mask. Did you give a shit about any of this? Does anybody? None of it matters, none of it's funny, and the writers don't give a shit about anything or anyone. Now, at least in this case, we're talking about characters so obscure that nobody's likely to care very much that you turn them into undignified, asinine parodies of themselves. But you already also pulled that stunt with Titania, the Abomination, and the Wrecking Crew, and that was plenty bad enough. Speaking of whom, one of the Wrecking Crew dudes walks in from the Sweat Lodge, Dirk Garthwaite, the Wrecker, which I have to point out because in 2 episodes, the show never even bothers to actually tell us what his name is. That's how important the male characters are. And if you thought this poor bastard was nerfed in his first appearance, holy shit! This time, it's as if a pod from the planet Soy came to Earth and took his form. The Wrecker has been visited by a lot of feminine energy in this place. His words. So Jen jolly greens herself and tries to emasculate him even more than the writers just did, fat chance of that, and he waves goodbye to his dignity and cowers in fear from her until Blonsky makes Jen sit in the calming chair so they can all talk through their emotions in a safe and healing place. Good God, I wish I was making this up! Turns out the Wrecker's been doing a lot of self-reflection since him and his buddies attacked She-Hulk and tried to steal her blood, and he's realized that real strength comes from looking in the mirror and deciding that he's going to work on himself. And he never needed a magic crowbar to feel strong. That just made him and his friends act like idiots. Yeah, see? The Wrecking Crew being supervillains like in the comics means they were being idiots. That's what the writers think of the comics. Not so subtle message hidden in there. Very nice. So Dirk tells Jen that he takes accountability for his actions and he's very, very sorry. Not sorry enough to go to the police and confess to committing assault, and God knows Jen doesn't insist he do it or alert the authorities either because female lawyer of the year and all that, but still, very sorry. So yeah, the Wrecking Crew, Titania, the Abomination, every single villain who's appeared on this show, basically. Because we're not taking anything seriously, we don't care about the comics, and we don't even care enough to write our own title character like she's a person worth giving a shit about. This right here might be the stupidest Jen has ever been, because she ends up spending all day in the company of one of the guys who tried to steal her blood, and never once does she think to ask, hey, why'd you try to steal my blood? It never even comes up! And what makes it even stupider, if such a thing is even possible, is that Dirk was in on the plot to steal She-Hulk's blood, which, if he'd really turned over a new leaf like he seems to have done, he would surely give Jen a heads up about, but he doesn't, which would indicate that this is all an act and he hasn't actually reformed, but if he hasn't reformed, then what the f*** is he even doing there? So eventually, after a lot of interminable, soul-crushingly boring horse shit that I won't subject you to, because unlike the writers, I don't want to gaslight you into throwing your computer out the nearest window, Jen tells them about Josh and how she's been obsessing over why he hasn't texted her back. And before you know it, Jen's ambiguously gay, diverse male BFFs are giving her dating advice and coaching her about whether she was ghosted, and it's so stupid and ridiculous you'd think it was a goddamn parody. And then we get to what passes for the point of this whole bullshit exercise. And it's so awful and so ass-backwards, I have to quote it word for word. Here's what she says. I met him when I was Jen, and he liked Jen. He specifically didn't ask about She-Hulk. Yeah, and you didn't think that was fucking weird? One of the most interesting things that's ever happened to anybody on Earth and he never asked about it? God, you're fucking stupid. You know in high school, that friend you have that's like cooler than you are, more attractive, athletic, they get all the attention from everyone? Hello. Like, you think life would be so much easier if I were that person. And I can turn into that person anytime I want to. And everyone pays attention when I'm this. My colleagues, my boss, guys. Yes, exactly! And that's why Jen is supposed to like being She-Hulk, for sake. She likes it. She likes being a superhero. She likes it that so many dudes are into her. She likes trying cases as She-Hulk because it makes her feel powerful and confident and sexy. That's why she's supposed to stay in her She-Hulk form more than her Jen form, because she f***ing enjoys it. See, the writers actually got the motivation right here, except they're using it as a reason for why Jen resents the She-Hulk identity when she's supposed to appreciate it for those very same reasons. It's the exact polar opposite of what it's supposed to be. Congratulations on completely missing the point, you dumb, stupid But it feels like cheating, because would they like me if I didn't have all this? Like, if I was just Jen, would the same guys who like She-Hulk stick around for Jen? Because some of them don't. And that sucks for Jen, because Jen is great. No. No, she's not. Jen, from what I know about you, you are awkward to the point of parody, insecure to the point of madness, got narcissism for days, and are completely oblivious to these things, not to mention all your other emotional problems, which I could do a whole separate video on. So yeah, most guys are probably not going to want to stick around for something like that. Most guys would probably prefer to date someone who's got their shit together. And that's not you, because Jen's not great, Jen's a hot f***ing mess. And the writers not understanding that has got to be the most pathetic part about all of this. And no one cares when they're She-Hulk. What? I don't understand that line. So I meet this guy who actually likes Jen, and that just felt good to know that, you know? And then he ghosts me, and it sucks. Oh, who gives a rat's ass? Go fight a supervillain or shut your pie hole already! So the group think that this Josh situation hurts so much because Jen hasn't been spending enough time with Jen. No, the problem is that she's been spending too much time as Jen and not enough time as She-Hulk! God, these writers are stupid! And that sucks, because they think Jen is pretty damn great. So, because the group genuinely values the whole of Jen, she learns to trust them and de-Hulkifies herself back into her Jen form, which might have been relevant if they hadn't already seen her Jen form when she walked in, but they did, so the whole thing is f***ing pointless. But Jen says it felt really good, and since it felt so good, it gives Porcupine that last little push he needed to take his own mask off, which he does, and under the mask he is some guy. I thought there was going to be a reveal of some kind there, like he'd be a character we know, or a celebrity cameo or something, but no, none of that. He's just some guy. Oh, and he smells bad. See, he's been wearing the Porcupine costume for a really long time, so I guess he hasn't been able to bathe in a while, so now he smells bad. That's the joke. Comedy. And so we arrive at the big climax. The moment the entire episode has been building up to, Jen getting cheered on by her ambiguously gay, diverse male BFFs as she triumphantly deletes Josh's number off her phone. This shit. If I wanted to watch a goddamn Lifetime movie, I sure as hell didn't need to get Disney Plus for that. Then the gang cheer Jen on as she spends some time in the sweat lodge. Not sure why she needed cheerleaders for that one. They make her a nice going away card, and she leaves with a better sense of her own self-worth, finally knowing who Jen Walters is as a person. And sadly, it's the opposite of who she's supposed to be, because these writers were hired by Marvel while Kevin Feige was in the bathroom with explosive diarrhea. A fitting metaphor for this show if ever there was one. But hey, now she understands that if Josh doesn't need Jen, then Jen doesn't need Josh. Which is good, because, shocker, Josh, that character that every audience member under the f***ing sun thought had to be evil, is evil. They do a flashback to the night Jen had sex with him, and we see him cloning her phone, taking a picture of her while she's sleeping, and texting someone, in all emojis because that's how villains roll in 2022, that he got her blood, somehow without the huge needle we saw last week, so beats me what that was about. And we see that Josh is in fact Hulk King from the Intelligentsia message board for She-Hulk trolls. Wait a damn minute, so Josh was capable of texting this whole time? That son of a bitch! Wow, what an unexpected development. On a show where the writer's disdain for men is eclipsed only by their disdain for the comics and Marvel fans in general, on a show where male characters are treated like jokes, assholes, idiots, soy latte drinking twats, or all of the above, the great guy who was super into Jen until he ghosted her right after they had sex was really a bad guy the whole time. I've never been more shocked than I am right now. Except that I have, and this episode was 35 straight minutes of rancid dog shit. Jesus Christ. And I thought the last episode was horrible, but at least that episode had a fight scene. I mean, it sucked, it was blink and you miss it, but at least it existed. At least when two characters started punching each other, it was something to break up the agonizing monotony of asinine, boring, self-indulgent garbage that was everything else in the episode. This episode didn't even have that going for it. Jen obsesses about a guy not texting her, and a bunch of soy-fueled dipshits talk about their feelings for half an hour. You could have taken your $25 million an episode budget, covered it in shit, and fed it to a bunch of hogs and gotten something more entertaining. At least that way the hogs would have gotten their money's worth, which is a lot more than I can say for Marvel Studios after they wasted their time producing this fiasco. If episode 6 was the most embarrassing thing the MCU has done, then this episode was the most spiteful. You can feel the writer's agenda through every insipid frame of this thing. Traditionally masculine supervillains from the comics are getting in touch with their feelings and rejecting toxic masculinity. Jen makes this supposed breakthrough as a character where she learned the exact opposite thing the character is supposed to learn. The writers can't pull their heads out of their asses long enough to realize how badly they f***ed everything up, unless f***ing everything up was exactly the point, which seems more and more likely by the week. The damn show's got more filler in it than Ms. Marvel did, and that's saying quite a lot. I mean, forget about First Gear. With just 2 episodes left, the plot hasn't even gotten into neutral yet. The big twist was so goddamn telegraphed the audience could see it coming from f***ing Mars. There's still all this shit, and next week, all signs are now pointing to the writers butchering Daredevil beyond all recognition. This episode was boring, lazy, spiteful trash. This entire show is an utter goddamn embarrassment, and it cannot end soon enough. She-Hulk, these writers. Let's get out of here. Thanks for watching, and while you're here, please do all the other YouTube things. Ding the bell icon and follow my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. I also have a live streaming channel. Links to everything are in the description box. And most importantly, give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment. It really helps out with the algorithm. Share the video around, subscribe, make sure you're still subscribed, and I'll be back with more soon. Take care, stay tuned. I'll see you next time.